Muy buenos días. Good morning. My name is Jose Carrion. I'd like to introduce myself for those who may not know me. I'm chair of the board, and we'd like to welcome all of you, chair of the Federal Oversight Board, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our 19th public meeting of the Oversight Board of Puerto Rico, which is being held by video conference in light of the current circumstance. As part of the meeting, we will be conducting a public hearing on the current status of the territory's comprehensive annual financial reports, also known as CAFRs. I would like to ask those folks connected to the video conference to cooperate in conducting a productive video meeting, including keeping themselves on mute during the video conference. Let me begin, if I may, by conducting a roll call to determine which members are present. Dr. Biggs, I see you there, but you're on mute. Mr. Garcia?
Present.
See you there, sir. Judge Gonzalez?
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez, are you on the phone? He is not. Ms. Matos Santos, are you on the phone? Okay. Dr. Skeel, Professor Skeel, are you with us?
I am with you. I'm
Nice.
present.
It's good. Glad to have you. And I'd like to also recognize, and I see that the ex officio member and Governor Vasquez's representative, Mr. Omar Marrero, is with us this morning as well.
Morning.
Good morning, Omar. We have a quorum, which is a majority of the voting members of the board with us today. So we shall proceed, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Now I'd like to ask our counsel, Mr. El Khoury, to act as secretary for this meeting.
I will.
Thank you all in attendance at this meeting being held by video conference, and those watching the live stream of the meeting via the board's website, which as usual is www.oversightboard.pr.gov. Once again, we are pleased to say that the audio of the meeting will be webcast, is available in English and simultaneous Spanish translation, as well as being translated in sign language. If you log into the English website, the audio will be English, and if you log into the Spanish website, you will hear the simultaneous translation. The Oversight Board will be handling the public's questions and comments through a form available on our site by clicking the webcast page. Please fill the form, including your name and any question or comments, and the board will later answer them during the assigned time period before the board votes on the fiscal plan. The public will have, from time to time, that the meeting starts up to 15 minutes prior to the public comments period, starts to share their questions or comments on this form. Questions that cannot be answered during the meeting due to time constraints will later be answered and published on our website. I see and would like to recognize the presence of the Honorable Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Francisco Párez Alicea.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Mr. Secretary, and we will be hearing from you later on today. Today, the topics that we will be covering on our public agenda are, number one, the approval of the minutes of the public meeting and executive session of the board, certain administrative matters, the opening statement by me, opening statement by our executive director, remarks on the Commonwealth officials on the fiscal year 21 budgets, commentary by our executive director on the certified Commonwealth budget for fiscal year 2021, followed by public comments on the certified budget for fiscal year 2021, and then we will close with public hearing on the status of the Commonwealth's comprehensive annual financial reports for fiscal year 2017 and fiscal year 2018, and lastly, other matters that we will deal with. So let's begin with the approval of the minutes. Our first order of business is to approve said minutes of the board's last public hearing held on the 27th of May, 2020, and the minutes of the board's executive session held on dates listed on Appendix A of your board packet. The proposed minutes are included in your meeting materials. Minutes are attached in Appendix B. Now I'd like to ask if anyone has any questions regarding these minutes. There being no questions, I would like to ask for a motion to approve said minutes.
Andrew, you're on mute.
I apologize. We're having technical issues here.
I hear you. Could you repeat the?
Okay, that's great. I apologize.
No
It's
worries.
switching me on and off.
No
I
worries.
would move to approve the minutes of the board's public meeting held on May 27, 2020, and the minutes of the board's executive sessions held on dates listed on Appendix A and the form presented to the meeting.
Thank you, Andrew. Does anyone second said motion?
Mr. Chairman, I second that motion.
Thank you. Let's proceed to a voice vote. Those in favor, please raise your hands and say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
And those opposed, please say no. Okay. All members having voted in favor of the motion, the minutes are approved. Now let me recognize once again Dr. Biggs.
I would like to make the following resolution. Between the adjournment of this meeting and the opening of the board's next public meeting, the board may consider in executive session any and all matters that is authorized to consider under PROMESA, including first, any certification determinations authorized by PROMESA, including certification determinations under Section 206 of PROMESA. Second, any submissions or authorizations authorized by PROMESA. And third, any filings authorized under Title III of PROMESA in each case that are set forth as part of the vote to convene such executive session. The board may also act by unanimous written consent between meetings in accordance with the bylaws, with such consent to include consent by electronic transmission.
Would anybody like to second that motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I second the motion.
Thank you. Let's proceed to a voice vote. Those in favor, please say a yes and raise your hand.
Yes.
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 Those opposed, say no. All members having voted in favor of the motion, the resolution is approved. Now let's move on to the public meeting to consider certification of the Commonwealth Fiscal Plan. Let me read a few words, if I may. As we all know, PROMESA establishes the annual process for the development and certification of the budgets of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and its covered entities. In short, the government of Puerto Rico has the authority and the responsibility to articulate the Commonwealth's budget and submit it to the Oversight Board for evaluation and potential certification. In turn, the purpose of the Oversight Board certification of the Commonwealth budget is to ensure there is adequate funding to support the areas that are a priority for our people in accordance with the Certified Commonwealth Fiscal Plan, which is the roadmap to lead Puerto Rico out of the fiscal crisis and on a path to recovery. If the Oversight Board finds that the budget proposed by the government is inconsistent with said certified fiscal plan, the board has the responsibility to certify a budget that is consistent with the certified fiscal plan. The reason for the Oversight Board budget certification requirement in PROMESA is fairly straightforward and known to everyone in Puerto Rico. For years, the Commonwealth engaged in deficit spending, overestimating revenues, and not maintaining sufficient controls over spending. As a result, government spent over and above the amount of fiscal resources at its disposal, spent in areas that were not priorities while underfunding pensions and other key services, and then borrowed to make up for the overspending. And even with this borrowing, the infrastructure of our island, the schools, the hospitals, the prisons, and more were not maintained at appropriate levels. This sustained pattern of deficit spending and borrowing is part of the reason why Congress legislated PROMESA. It is noteworthy that this is the fourth year that the government submits a proposed budget that is inconsistent with the certified fiscal plan. So again, this year, the Oversight Board will certify a budget prepared by the board in accordance with the fiscal plan. The concept behind the budget is fairly simple. There can't be spending that we cannot afford. The government must justify budgeted expenses. Funding sources need to be specified, and there must be spending controls in place to make sure we remain on track. Having said that, it must be noted that the budget that the Oversight Board will certify today is in large measure aligned with the government's proposed budgets and supports the government's priority areas of healthcare, public safety, and education. In fact, it must be noted that the budget process is not something the board does on its own or behind closed doors. On the contrary, it requires comprehensive due diligence and close collaboration with the government, which we have sustained with this administration. While we are mainly in agreement with the government in terms of the budget priorities, there are some differences that will further elaborated on during this meeting. Beyond that, there is no room to grow the spending envelope, i.e. the total overall expenditures. In an environment where there is little will to implement meaningful structural reforms to generate the economic growth and revenues that are so sorely needed by Puerto Rico and for the budget, the government needs to control costs, spend within its means, and do so in a transparent and prioritized way. I also note that the Oversight Board's budget certification process has grown more detailed over time, more accurate and transparent. Whereas we started by looking only at the Commonwealth's general fund, we now have a much better grasp of the full spending of the entire government, including special revenue funds, federal funds, public corporations, and others. Notwithstanding the lack of finalization of previous year's comprehensive annual financial reports, with respect to which we will have a hearing a little later on this morning, we continue to do our job to provide Puerto Rico the best and most transparent budget process possible to instill fiscal responsibility and ensure priorities such as pay-go retirement benefits are paid consistently. Now let me pass on the mic to our Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since November of 2019, the board has been working hand in hand with the government to develop the budgets for the Commonwealth and instrumentalities. This includes the Commonwealth across general fund and special revenue funds, COFINA, CRIM, PREPA, PRASA, HTA, the University of Puerto Rico, COSEC, PRIDCO, and 10 municipalities in our pilot program. Per PROMESA, the certified budgets need to be consistent with the certified fiscal plans. The fiscal plans, which are updated annually to incorporate the latest revenue and expenditure information and to reflect macroeconomic conditions, namely in this case the impact of COVID-19, are the 5-year blueprint to return prosperity to Puerto Rico and fiscal sustainability to the government and its different instrumentalities. In the last month, the Oversight Board certified updated, or in some cases new, fiscal plans for the 19 entities I just mentioned. And since then, we have worked with the government to develop budgets that are consistent with those fiscal plans. The budget process, as the chairman mentioned, is not a simple one. The Oversight Board requests a lot of information to validate agency requests, understand how agencies spend their taxpayer dollars, and make better management decisions that allow prioritization of much-needed funds. The Oversight Board also ensures that in addition to ensuring transparency and efficient use of public funds, the budget also serves as a tool to ensure implementation of the key priorities outlined by the government and the fiscal plan. Specifically on the Commonwealth's budget. Every year, the Oversight Board works with the government to develop the Commonwealth's budget for the next fiscal year. Unfortunately, for the 4th year in a row, and on the 4th anniversary of PROMESA, the government and the legislature were unable to submit a budget compliant with the fiscal plan. In fact, the legislature never submitted an official budget to the Oversight Board for its review. Notwithstanding several meetings to try to find a consensus amongst the board, the governor, the Senate, and the House, we were unable to do so. Even yesterday morning, we discussed compromises to agree on a reasonable cost for the Uniform Remuneration Plan coupled with necessary comprehensive civil service reforms. The government parties could not, unfortunately, come to an agreement, and notwithstanding, we certified a budget that took into account much of the consultations that occurred. After Mr. Morero's remarks, I'll discuss highlights of each of the certified fiscal year 2021 budgets in greater detail. Thank you.
I would like to now recognize Mr. Omar Marrero, the Executive Director of the Puerto Rico Fiscal Agency Financial Advisory Authority, known as here as AFAF, who will make his remarks regarding the fiscal year 21 budget. Mr. Marrero, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Executive Director Teresco, Mr. Chair, and members of the Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico. On behalf of the government of Puerto Rico, I thank you for the opportunity to make some brief remarks regarding the fiscal year 2021 budget. Just like the process to develop and certify the revised fiscal plan, developing the fiscal year 2021 budget for the government of Puerto Rico and its instrumentalities and public corporation has been very complex for multiple reasons, including the recent lockdowns and the high level of social and economic uncertainty caused by natural disasters and the global outbreak of COVID-19. Notwithstanding these circumstances for the past month, the government has been collaborating with the Oversight Board in this process, as just Executive Director Tedesco mentioned. After a month of hard work, on February 14, 2020, the government submitted its first proposed budget to the Oversight Board. With said submission, we brought to your attention that the baseline and saving targets originally established for fiscal year 2021 were insufficient to cover the projected expenditures for the next fiscal year. Moreover, we mentioned that if said parameters were not revised, the operation of the government of Puerto Rico will be significantly disrupted in the upcoming months and years. On May 8, 2020, the government submitted an updated proposed budget to the Oversight Board, which included, among other things, information related to the consent decrees and the consolidation of various agencies. After the revised fiscal plan was certified on June 7, 2020, the government submitted a further revised proposed budget. Among the main revisions to said proposed budget, I can mention the one-year delay in right-sizing measures to allow the government to continue to provide critical services to the people of Puerto Rico during the ongoing emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, and notwithstanding our best efforts, on June 10, 2020, said proposed budget was not accepted by the Oversight Board. Consequently, the Oversight Board submitted its own proposed budget to the Legislative Assembly for their consideration. Although the government's proposed budget and the board's version of the budget, which was certified last night and we're still reviewing, are similar in many ways, just as Mr. Chair just mentioned. However, I must highlight that there's still some important differences. Specifically, the governor's proposed budget included funds to pay in full the Christmas bonus for public employees, which, as you know, is part of their statutory compensation. Second, acquire through a competitive bid process a parametric insurance to comply with the obtain and maintain requirements of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Third, implement the uniform remuneration plan as part of the comprehensive civil service reform to optimize the administration of human resources in the government of Puerto Rico and to further enable the implementation of the single employer law. That remuneration plan would complement the uniform classification plan already in place, which consolidated 176 individual classifications plan into two plans, one for the career service and one for the at-will or trust employees, and reduce the job classification from more than 24,000 to only 1,575. As part of this comprehensive reform, the functions of employees across agencies were standardized and uniform, including position titles, job descriptions, minimum academic and work experience requirements, among others. The completion of this reform is definitely needed in order for the government to be able to act more efficiently and more effectively and to transfer employees between agencies as part of the single employer mechanism established by Act 8, 2017. Additionally, this plan is a necessary measure to provide transparency and equality to compensation between peers. There's no reason why a secretary at one agency, the Departamento de Hacienda, Department of Treasury, have a different compensation than a secretary at another agency doing the same job. Fourth, we also included funds to allow for an adequate transformation of the Puerto Rico Public Broadcasting Corporation through a process that is consistent and compliant with the procedures and regulations of the Federal Communications Commission. Fifth, we also included funds to adequately finance the 2020 electoral process, including general elections. And lastly, we also include funds to increase funding for medical residencies across the island. Even though the government's proposed budget was not accepted and the Oversight Board already certified its own budget for fiscal year 2021, the government will continue to work with the Oversight Board to find viable alternatives to implement these measures that will benefit public employees and the residents of the island. I'd anticipate that in the upcoming weeks and months, we will be collaborating with the Oversight Board and submitting proposals to the Oversight Board to reprogram funds within the certified budget to start implementing these measures. Mr. Chairman, Executive Director Tedesco, members of the board, on behalf of the government of Puerto Rico, I would thank you all, the many people that in one way or the other work in this process to develop the fiscal year 2021 budget. I look forward to continue working with you for the benefit of the people of Puerto Rico. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Marrero, and thank you, and the governor for their cooperation in this process. I'd like to ask if any member of the board would like to ask Mr. Marrero a question. There being no questions for Mr. Marrero, let's proceed to the general presentation by our executive director, our executive director, Ms. Jaresco, to give a general presentation of the certified budgets for the Commonwealth and its instrumentalities for fiscal year 21 that we certified last night.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope everyone can see the presentation, and I'll try and walk through it. The budget the Oversight Board approved last night, the Commonwealth budget, is compliant with the fiscal plan. It provides critical investments in key areas such as public safety, healthcare, education, and economic development. The budget includes, as Mr. Marrero just mentioned, a one-year delay of most agency efficiency right-sizing measures in order to focus all efforts on implementation of the reforms that are included in the 2020 Certified Fiscal Plan and those not yet implemented from previous fiscal plans. For the first time, this year's budget includes budgetary incentives, milestones that are tied to achievement of certain activities. And the budget continues to enhance transparency in government spending by incorporating a further level of program-level detail in key agencies with additional reporting. Finally, the budget also includes adequate funding to comply with the federal consent decrees across various agencies, as Mr. Marrero discussed. What you see here is total public sector spending, not the Commonwealth alone, but all public spending. And that total public sector spending, including instrumentalities and the special resolution that was added to replenish emergency reserves, totals $28 billion. Of that $22 billion, or 80%, is related to the central government, which consists of three elements: the general fund budget, that includes the funds the government uses for its day-to-day operations; the special revenue fund budget, which includes revenue the government generates from fees and services dedicated to particular usage; and funding from the federal government, for example, for Medicaid and for education, federal funds that are allocated by federal law and cannot be spent on anything other than those allocations. Looking at the central government budget by grouping, you can see that the spending is consistent with the fiscal plan priority areas, as I mentioned: health, education, public safety, economic development. And the budget adequately funds ongoing pension obligations as well as Social Security for police officers. The budget includes significant investments in economic development to enhance broadband infrastructure, healthcare, investments in facilities and technology, public safety investments in personnel and equipment, education investments to improve student outcomes, rural infrastructure, and road maintenance. As I mentioned, the fiscal year 21 certified budget includes about $90 million of budgetary incentives across the general fund and special revenue funds to encourage implementation of critical reform initiatives. Some of these include $36 million for ERP implementation and financial statement completion, $22 million for municipalities to incentivize consolidation of shared services, $17 million for the Department of Education to improve teacher and student attendance, encourage school innovation and implementation of technology, and $7 million for the Department of Economic Development, DDEC, to enhance transparency of its economic incentives. The general fund consists of $10 billion of spending allocated to payroll, operational expenses, and pay-go obligations. $9 billion of federal funds primarily for Medicaid, nutritional assistance, education, and housing. And $3.2 billion mostly related to central government public corporations. The general fund budgets increased in fiscal year 21 primarily due to non-recurring investments and reclassifications of certain expenditures that used to be classified in the special revenue, now into the general fund. That increase of $1 billion includes $400 to expand access to broadband for the residents of Puerto Rico, thereby improving economic outcomes and opportunities, particular in rural areas, $50 million to invest in workforce development, specifically focused on business and technology-related disciplines, and $448 million, as I described, of things formerly classified as special revenue expenditures, as well as $222 million of operational support for the Highway Transportation Authority, or HTA. The fiscal year 21 certified budget allocates regular, non-reconstruction capital investments, so this is not including hurricane reconstruction, of $790 million across all funds and agency groupings. There is a 54% increase in general fund capital expenditures over last year. This is driven in part by non-recurring healthcare facility investments being made very much in response to and an acknowledgement of the challenges in the post-COVID world. Infrastructure, technology, and equipment comprise the majority of the capital investment. And 88% of the capital expenditures are for identified projects, with only the remaining 12% being left in an unallocated capital expenditure budget. Moving to the independently forecast component units that are part of this budget, they make up $5.2 billion in total spending across all fund types, of which $1.5 billion is in special revenue. Certain independent forecast component unit revenue is expected to be impacted by COVID-19, and a corresponding reduction is going to be required in operational activities. This includes tourism, ports, and convention center. In December of 2019, the Further Consolidated Appropriations Act was passed, which provided supplemental federal funding up to $5.7 billion in total to Puerto Rico's Medicaid program through September 30th, 2021. And the additional federal Medicaid funds reduced the amount of required state funding share in fiscal year 21. Moving on to the instrumentalities. I'll run through them relatively quickly. And this presentation should be available on our website for anyone who has further questions. Beginning with PREPA. The fiscal year 21 budget continues the path towards improving PREPA's grid and investing in its maintenance and upgrade while the transition to LUMA is completed. From the revenue perspective, the budget projects a reduction in revenues in fiscal year 21 to $2.7 billion compared to last year's budget of $3 billion. And the estimate for last year was higher prior to COVID. This decline in revenue is driven by population decline, by economic decline, and by adoption of energy efficiency and distributed generation efforts, combined with, of course, the short-term effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. With regard to major cost categories, fuel and purchase power, or F&PP, costs about $1.6 billion in this fiscal year, lower than last year's budget, and the reduction in these fuel costs is driven by reduction in demand, downward pressure on global fuel prices, with prices expected to continue to be lower for the majority of fiscal year 21. But additional savings in fuel and power were brought on by the amendment to the PREPA agreement with Freepoint to do some fuel hedging, the conversion of San Juan 5 and 6 from diesel to natural gas, the renegotiation of a contract with Ecoelectrica, and improved plant maintenance to increase efficiency and economic dispatch. With regard to non-labor expenses, the budget supports maintenance and reliability through investments in vegetation management and proactive maintenance. It allocates $70 million for vegetation management and $215 million for maintenance. Despite the fact that the vegetation management budget is slightly lower than last year, it's important to note that last year PREPA did not utilize some 40% of that budget, 60% of that budget. So this is still a great deal more than the actual spending last year. Finally, this budget for the first time reflects and takes into account the fees to be paid to LUMA during the front-end transition period. Moving on to PRASA, the Water Authority. The fiscal year 21 PRASA budget takes advantage of the completed federal debt reprogramming and other financial improvements to start returning significant investment into the water system at pre-hurricane levels, pre-fiscal year 19 levels. The fiscal year 21 budget of $1.073 billion contemplates only a modest annual increase for all customer segments, $37 million. It includes gradual normalization of collections in the post-COVID period and a recovery of some $15 million of uncollected revenues from this COVID pandemic period. The most exciting part of the budget is, frankly speaking, the capital investment program. This program was restarted in the Q3 of fiscal year 2020, and this fiscal year 21 budget allows sufficient funds to continue to invest in the water system. $349 million in capital expenditures will be funded, reaching pre-hurricane levels of investment, to provide for capital and maintenance upgrades that have been suspended effectively since 2015. Part of this, 35% of it, is being funded with federal funds that have been made available because of the completion of the federal debt reprogramming. The remainder of the need is being funded by the Capital Improvement Fund, which is a carryover from last year. The budget includes modest yet important operational measures like electricity and chemical optimization, water loss reduction measures. They're not projected to produce immediate savings, but beginning on these day-to-day reforms will be necessary to bring PRASA to operational condition. Lastly, this year's budget also includes, as I said, the benefits of that debt reprofiling that was executed with our federal partners, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Environmental Protection Agency. The savings that resulted are $42 million per year, and that has helped close the deficit in this fiscal year 21. Moving on to the University of Puerto Rico. As with the 2020 University of Puerto Rico fiscal plan, the objective of this fiscal year budget is to put the University of Puerto Rico, which is the most important engine for Puerto Rico's economic mobility, on a path to sustainability while ensuring that it has the tools it needs to manage during the current COVID pandemic. The fiscal year 2021 budget for UPR tracks the 2020 UPR fiscal plan with modest adjustments based on COVID. The revenues in this year's budget come to $1.22 billion. That includes the effect of delaying any reduction in the Commonwealth subsidy to UPR by a year, delaying any scheduled tuition or fee increases to relieve the burden on students and families this difficult year. But revenues also decline as a result of a decrease in enrollment, expected to be some 4.6% for undergraduates. It also declines based on COVID-19 related interruptions to self-generated revenues, such as hospital income, and macroeconomic declines that affect UPR-directed funding streams, for example, slot machine revenues being reduced. Another major cause of the significant decline in revenues versus the previous year is the reduction in the significant federal and private insurance disaster funds that were included in the fiscal year 20 budget that were one-time increments. The budget sees a $1.56 billion level of expenditures, and the board is expecting the University of Puerto Rico in this year to make marked improvements in transforming the administrative part of the university. Nevertheless, the budget continues to invest in academic excellence. There's a 3% increase in faculty payroll budgeting, continued growth in the university's pool of need-based scholarships beyond those provided in the Commonwealth budget, and over $10 million to support implementation of the system's much-needed transformation. The budget also enables the University of Puerto Rico to spend up to $30 million in capital expenditures, $42 million when you include equipment. It's significant to note this because University of Puerto Rico has routinely underinvested in its capital expenditures to cover its operating deficits. Fiscal year 2021 also assumes that 50% of the CARES Act funds received by the government of Puerto Rico that were not directly distributed to students will be expended during the academic year to help the system adjust to the new normal. This could include expanded distance learning, physical reconfiguration of campus spaces as needed, student counseling as required by the University of Puerto Rico. On pensions at the university, specifically, this year's budget contemplates freezing the defined benefit plan, moving to a defined contribution plan, and reducing accrued benefits to bring annual pension contributions to a sustainable level. As a result of these measures, the budgeted contribution that's required to fund the pension plan falls by $40 million to $121 million in annual expenditures. However, the budget also includes a $40 million emergency reserve, and that emergency reserve is there to be used, for example, if pension funding levels are required to be higher because of a failure to implement those reforms. So the funding in the failure of implementing the pension reforms to adequately fund the pension are in the budget. The net deficit that this results in is $33 million post-debt service. And the budget implies pre-debt service an operating surplus of 15. The board has consistently said that even after the measures have been implemented, there is not enough of an operating surplus to cover the current $48 million in annual debt service that relates to a legacy debt amount of $542 million. We believe that this level of operating surplus provides the right balance of allowing the university to maintain its important function as an engine of economic development while also requiring adequate transformation efforts to right-size the administration and reinvest in academic excellence. HTA, the Highway Transit Authority. The budget reflects efforts towards addressing safety, congestion, and the good repair of Puerto Rico's highway system. The Puerto Rico road system performs poorly compared to most of the United States on several road quality, safety, and congestion metrics. And despite the need to manage expenses, the Oversight Board continues to support the critical importance of investing into this infrastructure, given the value to the economy and the ability to promote economic development on the island. The budget's revenue includes $862 million in operating revenues. That's revenues earned through tolls, toll fines, transit funds, Commonwealth appropriations, federal funds from the Federal Highway Authority and Transit Authority. And this amount of revenues is some $74 million higher than last year's budget, though it's important to note that last year's revenue targets were not met because revenue measures were not implemented. In terms of capital expenses, the investment into the roads, the budget proposes $490 million in capital expenditures across federal, non-federal, and emergency repair programs to improve the safety and quality of the transportation system and enhance daily life in Puerto Rico. Capital projects are to focus on achieving a state of good repair and provide benefits from road resurfacing to bridge repairs, highway sound barriers, sidewalks, bicycle paths, improving toll reliability, and safety improvements. The budget provides for the creation of an emergency reserve totaling $115 million in this fiscal year. And this budget results in a $90.6 million operating expense deficit, a $16.3 million capital expenditure deficit, and these are funded by a Commonwealth transfer. Moving to COFINA. COFINA, as you all know, is the public corporation that manages the debt service for the sales and use tax bonds, certified a new fiscal plan in June 2020 to account for the expected decrease in sales and use tax collections due to COVID. Today, the FOMB certified COFINA's second annual budget after COFINA's successful Title III Plan of Adjustment confirmation in October of 2018. And in fiscal year 21, despite the forecast SUT reductions due to COVID, COFINA is expected to receive the total revenue stipulated by the bond indenture. The operating expenses of COFINA are mostly funded by interest earned on the bank balances outstanding that hold the SUT collections. And that FY21 operating budget reflects COFINA's normalized, recurring operating expenses at a level of $1.4 million, supports limited staff, certain professional services, and other non-personnel expenses required for the operation of COFINA. PRIDCO. The Oversight Board certified on June 29th PRIDCO's first fiscal plan as a separate entity from the Commonwealth, and today certifies its first independent annual budget. COVID-19 affected PRIDCO from the lockdown and curfew measures, and even with those COVID impacts continuing into 2021, net revenues are expected to increase from an expected $63 million in fiscal year 20 to approximately $67 million in fiscal year 21. This is benefiting, the revenues are benefiting from accelerated efforts to divest of non-core properties, so the sale of non-core properties. The objectives of the fiscal year 2021 budget are to complete the implementation of Act 160 of 2018 and to reduce risk to the income earning potential in PRIDCO's real estate portfolio through increased CapEx funding, both cornerstone objectives of the fiscal plan. On the first objective, Act 160 requires the consolidation of PRIDCO's back office into DDEC, and this budget makes that happen by authorizing funding of up to $10.6 million under a memorandum of understanding for the transfer of back office costs to DDEC. On the second objective, PRITCO will benefit from approximately $15 million of capital expenditures in fiscal year 21, more than a three-time increase over the previous year. PRITCO can only begin to disperse this fund after achieving a key fiscal plan milestone, completing a capital reserve study. They need to continue having access to these funds in the future years. Compliance with the parameters of the capital reserve study will be required. CRIM. With regard to the fiscal plan, property tax revenues have been and are expected to remain relatively flat during the next 5 years. Thus, the need for more efficient property tax collection. Measures in the CRIM fiscal plan aim to increase real and personal property tax revenues and collections without any increase in tax rates. They are meant to create a more fair and equitable property tax system where every taxpayer pays their fair share. And as a result, over the next few years, CRIM's operating revenue should grow as property tax collection efficiency increases. Revenues for 2021 for the operating entity of CRIM, not the property taxes, are projected to be approximately $29.8 million, most of which comes from the 5% administrative fee charged to municipalities for the property tax collection. The budget represents a slight increase over last year's budget of $29.6 million. It reflects key investments needed to support the implementation of that fiscal plan. The budget includes $1.2 million to hire additional appraisers to help address the current backlog of non-appraised properties. And in addition, the budget for professional services is approximately $250,000 higher in order to support the newly launched call center. The call center is, again, expected to improve tax collections. And finally, in this section, the instrumentality COSEC. Implementation of measures here at COSEC is the most critical step in reforming the institution and ensuring the long-term stability and soundness of the cooperativa system on the island. The operating budget of the entity is $11 million in fiscal year 21. COSEC is required to improve supervisory interventions, specifically intervening quickly and efficiently in insolvent cooperativas within 24 months. And as part of that implementation, the COSEC needs to have sufficient resources to conduct the required 24-month interventions on insolvent cooperativas. So a $400,000 funding is approved for COSEC to hire 10 additional examiners, and these funds get released upon achieving budget milestones. Finally, I will briefly describe the budgets of the 10 municipalities in the pilot program. Municipalities are expected to experience some reduced revenues from both sales and use tax and property taxes as a result of COVID-19, which has had a significant impact on small and medium-sized businesses outside of the metro area. Moreover, continued decline in population and continued decline in certain business activities further puts pressure on municipal revenues. The fiscal plans aim at assisting the municipalities with this reality through measures aimed at working with CRIM to improve property tax collections, maximizing disaster recovery assistance and federal funding, working with NGOs and other partners, as well as attracting long-term private investments to grow the economies in these municipalities. The measures also pursue reductions in expenditures through back office consolidations or cost-sharing agreements amongst municipalities, which should improve quality of services while reducing costs. And finally, the other area that we aim to address for the benefit of the municipalities is their relationship with the central government in terms of the use of their own resources to cover services and expenditures that correspond to central government agencies and the reimbursements related therewith. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Esco. If we can, we understand there's a great deal of information here, and there's more information available in our web page. However, we have, do we have questions from folks who are listening in or that registered a question beforehand? We'll be answering those right now. And just be aware that whatever we cannot answer due to time, we'll be happy to answer and post later on. And again, more information is available on our website. So if we could, Mr. Resco, could we read the questions and begin that process, please?
First question came from Lazav. The question, comment, in the past, the government used the courts to delay and many times stop board plans that cost millions in legal fees. It is evident that the government is limitless in using the people's money to pursue legal actions that have political tones. When and how will the board stop this practice? I can share the answering with Mr. Morero. On the part of the board, we will continue to do our work as we understand our mandate, and we will do it as efficiently as possible so that we can complete that mandate, 4 years of balanced budgets and returned market access at reasonable interest rates, and then complete Promesa and be done. No, I don't believe that there's any intent on our part to expend funds in any unreasonable way, solely focusing our efforts and time and taxpayer money on implementing Promesa. Second series of questions from Mr. Victor Gonzalez, and these are with regard to PREPA's budget. There are 6 questions, I'll read them. And to be frank, I'm going to ask that Mr. Gonzalez allow us some time to compile answers to these very specific questions and post them and get back to you. But the questions are, number 1, what are the projected kilowatt sales and kilowatt generation that the budget is based on? Number 2, what is the depreciation expense? Number 3, what is the interest expense? Number 4, if the projection is a deficit without the depreciation expenses and the interest, how come the basic rates have not been changed? Number 5, the restructuring in Title III, FOMB, and P3 expenses have gone up to $118 million. Why? Particularly if there is now a $135 million allocation to the Luma T&D contract that was partially justified as a savings on advisors, yet that allocation went up. Why? And 6, does fiscal responsibility allow for a deficit budget? Let me try and give some general answers and leave the particulars to the website. Depreciation expense is not part of the budget. These are cash-based budgets. In terms of the P3 expenses, the Title III and restructuring expenses going up, this is the year that we will hopefully, together with the government and PREPA, come out of bankruptcy, and the final P3 costs for the successful transaction with Luma, but also the potential transaction foreseen by the next step of the unbundling of the generation and privatization, or seeking a private operator for generation, is part of that budget. The $135 million allocated to the Luma T&D contract is indeed partially justified by what we expect to be a savings on advisors, but because the transition has just begun, those savings have not been incorporated, although they are expected. The advisors that you would expect to be first reduced would be the professional services, non-Title III, in the PREPA budget. And in terms of allowing for a deficit budget, no, our goal is always to achieve an operational balance. In this case, the decision was taken to allow PREPA to reach into its working capital, its bank accounts, to finance that deficit, which I believe is about $122 million, so that it would not have to be passed on to ratepayers in this year. Again, any questions I haven't answered, we will on the website. Okay. Next question. Several agencies, particularly education and Hospital de Adultos, have higher pay-go expenses than nomina, or payroll expenses. Why is that? Well, the Commonwealth has more retirees today than it has active employees. So the employment retirement system records 96,000 Commonwealth retirees for whom pay-go is being paid, and 71,000 Commonwealth active employees. In the teachers' retirement system, similarly, there are 43,000 retirees receiving pay-go and only 33,000 receiving payroll. So indeed, pay-go tends to be higher than payroll for that reason. Total payroll, all funds, because you have to include the special revenue in the Commonwealth, and the general fund is actually higher than total pay-go. And so you have to not compare simply general fund. Total payroll is $4.3 billion, and total pay-go all funds is $2.6 billion. For certain agencies, they've seen significant reductions in headcount in the last few years, but pay-go, and that's why their pay-go may exceed payroll. Their current active employees is less than what they had in the past as the government is right-sized over several years. The next question. Hospital Universitario de Adultos has $71 million in pay-go and $18 million in nomina or payroll. Is that correct? Why is it 4 times more? Hospital Universitario in this budget is showing the pay-go for the entire Department of Health, and the pay-go hasn't been allocated among specific programs. The government has not yet been able to identify where the retirees are in the Department of Health system. So pay-go is not allocated, and you really can't judge from that total how much goes to the hospital itself. If you look at the Department of Health in total, payroll is $79 million and pay-go is $71 million. Next question. Education pay-go is $150 million more than nomina or payroll. Why? Again, if you take all funds together, not looking at the general fund only, total payroll for the Department of Education is $1.4 billion, which is greater than total pay-go retirement of $1.1 billion. The next question comes from Jose Martinez Claus. The question is, can you provide more detail of the compromises that would have allowed for a compliant budget from the legislature? What happened that the negotiations fell apart? The compromise that was being discussed included allowing the government to pay Christmas bonuses from any savings achieved during the fiscal year, allowing WIPR to be funded for a 1-year transition if the legislation on the privatization was passed by July 15th, and allowing for the uniform remuneration plan that the government described, Mr. Madero described, to move forward October 1st for 70% of the classifications, the frontline office workers, if certain other civil service reform elements had been completed by then, in particular, implementation of an annual appraisal system for government employees and a benchmarking to be done with the National Association of Treasurers, Auditors, and Controllers. What happened, we did not reach agreement, as simple as that. That compromise was not acceptable to all parties. Next question comes from Luis Martinez Caceres. And the question is to Senor Omar Marrero. Why is the government so focused on paying Christmas bonuses when they have been paid in full and so many people in the private sector have been laid off?
Thank you for the question. The answer is quite simple. It is part of the statutory compensation of the public employees, and it is provided by law.
The next question from Ana Felix. Do you have confidence that the Uniform Remuneration Plan achieves the intended results? That was part of why the ask from the Oversight Board was for additional elements to the classification unification. In the elements that we requested to try and ensure that this increase in pay as a result of the uniform classification changes would improve civil service results. Job descriptions, as Mr. Madero described, were being put in place. What we required incrementally was the annual performance appraisals to govern any kind of promotions or increases in pay going forward. So a system of performance, and then benchmarking to the states in terms of best practices, certain groups of employees in accordance with the National Association of Treasurers, Auditors, and Controllers. So we were trying to build confidence that that measure would, in fact, deliver more results. And the last question that we have today from Max Capital LP. How is it that Puerto Rico can increase spending when all other states are reducing costs? That's a good question. In fact, Puerto Rico is one of the only places in the United States that is increasing spending in fiscal year 21 and not laying off people. I think it's important to underline that we've achieved a great deal. And this has happened because of the cooperation, collaboration between the Oversight Board and the government over the past few years to reduce the size of spending that we inherit today. The footprint, the size of government has been reduced over the past 3 years, and that has enabled us, despite declining revenues, to increase somewhat our spending, not tremendously, but increase it somewhat, but certainly not reduce it, and still be balanced. That's because we reduced the footprint over the past 3 years since Promesa, and that is one of the benefits that we are enjoying in this fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Teresko, and I would like to thank the public for those questions. Again, there is more information available on our website, and if you submitted your questions late, we'll be happy to get back to you with the appropriate answers as soon as we process that information. So thank you for participating. Now, if I may, we'd like to move to the public hearing portion of this meeting. And I'd like to ask once again Mr. Teresko to provide some background on the issue before us today, which is the Commonwealth's efforts at issuing its audited comprehensive annual financial reports for fiscal year 2017 and for fiscal year 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We can all agree that completion of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico's audited financial statements is a top priority for the Oversight Board and for the government, and it is at the core of Promesa's objectives for the benefit of the people of Puerto Rico. It is only with the completion and the establishment of best practices that we can achieve the full mandate of Promesa and have and expect returned market access at reasonable interest rates. This is a critical element to completing the mandate. For years, the issuance of the audited financial statements, better known as CAFRs, has been delayed. Most notably, the fiscal year 2015 and fiscal year 2016 CAFRs were both issued and published over 1,000 days after each fiscal year ended. The fiscal year 17, 18, and 19 CAFRs have yet to be issued as of this date. And despite best practices that call for audited financial statements to be published no more than 180 days after the end of a fiscal year, today is day 1097 for the fiscal year 17, day 732 for the fiscal year 18, and day 367 for the fiscal year 19 CAFRs. To that effect, the Oversight Board in its oversight role has been actively collaborating with the government in an attempt to, first, identify the challenges to issuance. Second, to ensure that the audits are completed as quickly as possible. Third, to work with the government to institutionalize best practices and to assure that the government has appropriate resources for the preparation of those CAFRs. And during this fiscal year, we've been conducting recurring meetings with the government, in some cases on a weekly basis, with the Department of Treasury, Hacienda, with the government's external auditors, and with key component entities required to complete the audit, to help expedite the overdue delivery of the 17 CAFRs and assess the timing of the 18 audit. It's in this spirit that the Oversight Board has provided recommendations on relevant administrative orders submitted for the Board's consideration pursuant to the rules, regulations, and orders review policy. We requested that the government provide weekly updates from the Department of Treasury on progress and risks to the completion of the 2017 CAFRs, which we receive, progress reports on the fiscal year 2018 audit preparation, which we are now receiving, submission of the fiscal year 2018 proposed external auditor contract pursuant to the Board's contract review policy, which has been delivered for our review, although in an incomplete submission, and any and all other information requested in any effort to lend a hand, evaluate key constraints, and facilitate the prompt delivery of current and future audits. Furthermore, the latest 2020 certified fiscal plan and fiscal year 2021 certified budget include incentive milestones and additional resources to promote and assist with timely completion of these pending audits. Some of the incentives and investments include a $1.6 million appropriation to hire staff accountants in Hacienda's Central Accounting Division so that critical skills and capabilities can be retained in-house while reducing the reliance on costly professional services. Second, a one-time $1,500 bonus to individual central accounting employees, estimated at a total cost of $100,000, if both the official 2017 CAFR is published and a draft of the 2018 CAFR is provided to the Oversight Board by November 2020. And finally, $36 million in capital expenditures for the implementation of a new government enterprise resource plan, ERP system, broken down into $14 million for stage one, once a dedicated project team is in place by August 2020, and $22 million for stage two after wave one is completed, somewhere between September 2020 and February 2021. Despite the government's efforts and investment to comply with the issuance deadlines and the Oversight Board's willingness to assist the government in any way possible, there are still high risks in producing timely audits. Disaggregated accounting systems, manual procedures, numerous circular letters, and a decentralized OCFO function have contributed to the delays in producing these audited reports. And that remains the real question. When all is said and done and the Oversight Board completes its mandate, how will the government act differently? What will the department do to change processes and procedures and ensure that this is fixed on a going forward basis permanently on the basis of best practices? The Oversight Board is committed to transparency, accountability, and to the sound administration that ultimately results in better services for the people on our island. And in light of these goals, it is in the people's best interest to conduct this public hearing today on the status of the overdue audited financial statements of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. As always, the Oversight Board is willing and welcoming collaboration with the government to accomplish these objectives and ensure responsible fiscal practices are institutionalized to achieve sustainability permanently and a return to capital market at reasonable rates.
Thank you, Mr. Esco. Now we have before us the opportunity to engage with and listen to the person responsible for this issue, the Honorable Secretary of the Treasury of Puerto Rico, the Honorable Francisco Pares. He will provide, I'm told, a presentation and hopefully shed some light as to why we are where we are on this topic. So welcome, Mr. Secretary. Welcome to the meeting.
Hi, everyone. Hi, members of the board, its chairman and executive director, and my colleague and peer, much appreciated, Mr. Omar Marrero. First, I also want to share our belief and our commitment with respect to the issuance of the financial statements. We have been very committed to present all the information for the benefit of the people of Puerto Rico. I think that in 2020, Puerto Ricans have more information with respect to the financial outlet or outlook of the government of Puerto Rico than ever before. And this is a huge accomplishment from the government, the board, and the people of Puerto Rico, which are the ones that has the more interest of having this information available. Having said that, I look a little bit younger than I am. I used to work my first job out of graduation in college. I was part of the accounting department from a bank, a disappeared bank, who had back then in 2009, close to $50 million in gross revenues. Its accounting department had closely to almost 50 employees, plus external consultants, and not even taking into consideration the technology that they had back then, which was pretty much better than the one that we have right now in the government of Puerto Rico. And I remember that my compensation back then was almost the double than the compensation generated by employees within Hacienda. That was my experience in an accounting department in a much smaller institution with the same degree of complexity from a technical standpoint. Having said that, let's go to the executive summary in slide 3 of the slide 4 of the presentation. Slide 5, apologies. I don't know if, perfect. We have here the executive summary in addition to my opening remarks with respect to my experience back then in 11 years ago in an accounting department in the private sector. During the past year, the progress in completing the audit financial statement have been hampered by multiple events, changing the government back in July 2019, which was the day that I assumed the leadership of the Puerto Rico Treasury Department. Obviously, there were federal indictments that included a managing partner of a key service provider, which raises a lot of questions with respect to the services performed that we needed to answer in a quickly fashion to many people that had a stake in the process of issuing financial information for the people of Puerto Rico. Obviously, the earthquakes that occurs by the end of 2019, early 2020, and obviously the lockdown that was triggered by the COVID pandemic. As you will note, the department has a full internal external advisor team working on the issues and solutions for the issuance of the 2017 and the 2018 financial statements, providing the board more information that in the past few years with respect to an ongoing status of the preparation of these financial statements. And on other points, that the Treasury Department has developed a long-term plan that provides a framework for the issuance of delayed financial statements, as well as a robust platform to enable accurate expectation for future issuances. Obviously, we need to invest in our system from a technological perspective. We need to also invest in our people from the human resources perspective, and also we need to invest on monitoring processes and execution processes. I had the honor of being prior being secretary for the Puerto Rico Treasury Department. I was an assistant secretary for internal revenue, and I was in charge of the implementation from many operational aspects. So I know from firsthand how difficult and how challenging it is to implement operational mandates due to the bureaucratic and lack of resources that we might have in the respective areas. And I have to say that the central accounting area is even more depleted than the internal revenue area within the Puerto Rico Treasury Department, as we have only close to 12 to 13% of the headcount active, making their roles for the issuance of the financial statements. So certainly, we have only 27 career employees working in the central accounting area. This used to have 208 employees actively working for the preparation of the financial statements. So this depletion, it's one of the reasons why there has been a delay from the issuance of the financial statements that we have been seeing for years up to this point. Let's go to slide 6, if you will. This gives you a background on the financial statement internal procedures. We need to provide audit support. We need to prepare the audit financial statement draft for evaluation purposes of our external audits. And also, we need to gather the financial statement from the component units in order to put together a document which is 400 pages long. We are talking about 75 component units, very complex. Many of those component units are even more complex than the disappeared bank that I used to work back in 2009. So certainly, it's quite a project and quite a challenge. The audit support encompasses conversion entries, and most probably you will know as of now that pre-FAS, it's based on cash basis. So we need to make some conversion entries to convert it to the modified accrual. That takes time from external consultants. Obviously, that takes time as well for external consultants within the agencies and career employees that works in the corresponding agencies that are issuing the financial information for the Puerto Rico Treasury Department. Obviously, we need to encompass the accounts payable, accrued compensation, the preparation of the GASB 68 and 73, which addresses the net pension liabilities, which were pretty new. They were issued a couple of years ago. Obviously, the cash, the reconciliation, which is a very time-consuming process, the long-term debt, how we can account those, specifically in a scenario that we are facing in a bankruptcy process, capital leases and revenues expenses. Most of these support are, let's say, regulated by the issuance of 6 to 7 central accounting circular letters, which we issue to the corresponding agencies so they can put together the information that we need to gather in order to include that information in the financial statements for the evaluation of the external auditors. We are talking about 90 agencies that we need to put together along with the 75 component units. Obviously, the second part, the preparation of the financial statement, is a 400-page long document. Every note is critical. Every disclosure included therein goes by a very long review process, not only internally, but also by the external auditors. Almost any significant disclosure goes by a review by our external auditors that end in their national office for the proper reporting and for the proper quality review that they believe it's necessary for the issuance of these financial statements. And also, after the completion of the separate component units audit, that is a really big challenge, we need to actually include that information in our financial statements. It usually takes 2 to 3 days to include the components unit audited financial information in our financial statements. So we are talking that most probably it's about almost 200 days to include the component units information in a correct fashion in our financial statements if you use the days average that it takes to include the information. Let's go to slide 7 to provide a background on the Puerto Rico's financial statement baseline. This gives you some factors that contributes the delay. Obviously, we already talk about the complex government structure, even though it's even more complex than the bank that it used to work back in 2009. We have employees. I think that almost the half of the employees focus on the preparation of this information that is needed. The centralized accounting system, the executive director already mentioned it in her opening remarks. We also believe that it's very much needed an update in the financial accounting system from a technological standpoint, but it's not on the only challenge that we have. Obviously, the coordination with the component units auditors, we are talking about 26 firms that are hired. Any focus on this or any approach, consolidate much firms also has their own challenges. Having many firms has its challenge for the coordination. So certainly the coordination of the component units, it's something that we cannot overlook. Outdated payroll processing system delays the process to include the information from payroll, which is a significant portion of the financial statements. We will see that one of them are the ones that are included as pending matters with respect to the 2017 financial statements. And the consolidation of the components unit information, we already said that it takes 2 to 3 days. Many of this information is exchanged in in Excel format. So it talks a lot of how the process is from a technological standpoint. It's a very manual process. We have limited personnel with the required expertise. We have 27 employees vis-a-vis 50 employees in the bank that are used to work, which is a fraction of the work that encompasses within the government. And I think we only have one certified public accountant as part of the headcount of the central accounting area. And obviously lack of continuity within agencies due to high turnover. And I want to pause here within the agencies perspective, because by the end of the 1990s, it was delegated the pre-intervention process for the accounting transactions within the agencies. I think the department issued a couple of publications regulating that pre-intervention process that actually was delegated to the head of each agency. So when we are talking about depleted resources, I'm talking only in the central accounting area, which is the one that I have full visibility about the headcount. But I also have to point out that many agencies are facing the same depletion. So we have small resources within the agencies that are actually not dealing only with the accounting aspects in the pre-intervention process and the reconciliation process that are necessary to put together the information, but also they are juggling with many duties. So when I'm talking back at my job in 2009, I was solely focused on reporting from my accounting department. Now our employees in each agency are focused on many aspects as a result of the attrition that the agency has been facing in the last couple of years. And this has dramatically reduced the effectiveness from the government of Puerto Rico to put together the information on a correct fashion and in a timely fashion, which results in additional work performed by the Puerto Rico Treasury Department, external consultants, and most probably audit hours from our external auditors. If we can go to page 9 from the presentation, if you will. Obviously, we do understand that we have been in default, if you will, with respect to the issuance of the financial statements. But on the other hand, we have put together almost 44 financial reports available publicly to the people of Puerto Rico and to the board. So they can have, even though we don't have the audited financial information, we can have more financial information on a regular fashion and on a timely fashion. If we go to page 11 of the presentation, we include some factors specifically for the financial statement of 2017 that result or influence in the issuance of the financial statements. When we are talking about a bankruptcy process, certainly the going concern assessment takes more time, dramatical more time than previously. So the going concern assessment has been a huge deal with respect to putting together the information in order to issue for the external auditors to issue the opinion. Obviously, the subsequent events, even though the financial statements are based on the financial information from 2017, the generally accepted accounting principles obligate us to make disclosure of certain subsequent events that are significant for the readers of those financial statements. PROMESA and the changes that occurs as a result of all this process adds more complexity with respect to the completion of the subsequent events disclosure. Restructuring the retirement system, restructuring the public debt, among other things, had a huge impact in the central government financial statements. From an operational standpoint, the emergency that was provided by Hurricanes Irma and Maria didn't help at all, as it paralyzed the government and the island for a couple of months. The implementation of additional complex accounting standards that were introduced a couple of years ago, GASB 70 and 68, it took more than 1 year to implement those standards in our internal process. Additional procedures with respect to our lotteries actually resulted in a deferral or disacceleration of the issuance of the financial statements. And obviously the insolvency of GDB led to an impairment recording in the central government that needed a closer attention and analysis from our external consultants, our external auditors, and our head of the central accounting area back then. Obviously, others significant delays that we face with respect to critical component units, an investigation that was congressionally mandated. It will have an impact on the timing of the issuance of the financial statements. As per conversation with our external auditors, the indictment process of a managing partner from BDO added additional burden to the process of the issuance of the financial statements, and as part of the external audit process, federal and local investigations obviously increases the challenges and contractual issues that I think we have been making a lot of progress with respect to the contract process of the 2018 financial statements. When I compare my experience with the 2017 hiring process, and obviously if 2 hurricanes were enough, a change in government were enough, we had the Southwest earthquakes and the lockdown that certainly slowed the progress, not only in the government, but also in the capability of our external auditors to keep their ongoing operations. If we can go to page 12 of the presentation, slide 12. The audit procedure for the 2017 are substantially completed. A fourth draft was submitted to KPMG for final review. We expect a few additional changes, but I don't think they're going to be a showstopper with respect to any comments of that fourth draft that was provided to the external auditors. Contracts for auditors and consultants were executed on June 30, 2020. This is a huge improvement from our experience back in 2019. My experience back then was a pretty adverse one. And among the principal items that are in progress, issuance of the PREPA 2017 financial statements. We do know that PREPA is a critical component unit. There has been an ongoing process performed by BDO. Obviously, we are still pending on a US-wide report on the BDO investigation that might have a certain impact with respect to the issuance of the financial statements. We do understand that the issuance of the report that was mandated by Congress highly depends on the work that is performed by BDO on the PREPA aspects. A subsequent event certification from agencies and component units are currently in progress. Updated assessment on the impact costs from certain illegal acts is still evaluated by our external auditors, and reevaluation of process ongoing concerns. The GDP and GRS Retirement have not issued their 2017 financial statements. GDB expected to issue prior the issuance of the government of Puerto Rico financial statement. However, this issuance is not dependent on the issuance of the previously mentioned financial statements, as they are currently audited by KPMG. We can go to slide 2004, apologies, 14, slide 14, please. Here we have a status of the year 18, fiscal year 18 issuance, a series of meetings with entities that have not been issued. The 2018 financial statements were conducted between March and April. The deadlines are being reassessed due to the extended duration of the COVID-19 lockdown, which had an impact from an operational standpoint. And latest conversation with auditor confirmed that there has not been significant advance due to the COVID-19 lockdown. When we take a closer look, only 13 financial statement has been issued thus far. There were other 19 audits that were performed and issued. The corresponding opinion, it was qualified due to GASB 73. So they are still pending for the reissuance of these financial statements to consider the GASB 73. We have other entities that they are only pending for the GASB 73 disclosures, which are close to 13 entities or component units. Pending other audit work, we have 26 and not started since they are still working on 2017 are 4. So we have in progress 62 or in process 62 audits from the 75 that we are on hand. When I talk about the audit support, in one of the first slides of this presentation, I mentioned that many of that audit support were regulated by circular letters issued by the Central Accounting Area. We are close to 90% in average with respect to the submission of the information that is regulated by those critical circular letters. The start of the KPMG audit procedures for the 2018 financial statement, we believe they can commence as soon as mid-August. The issue of the GASB 73 report will be close to by the end of August. The component unit financial statement issuance, we expect them to have completely by September 30th. And we believe that we can be able to produce the first financial statement draft, the first very robust draft by the end of November. If we can go to slide 15, challenges with respect to the fiscal year 18. Obviously, we are working towards making available the draft by November 30th. Some noteworthy challenges encountered: timely issue of the GASB 73 report. Obviously, these new dates, as a result of all the operational challenges that we mentioned, puts in jeopardize the issuance of the timely issuance of the component units financial statements. Therefore, an alternate plan is under discussion with our KPMG folks to accelerate the component unit financial statement issuance. The following component units pose a risk of not issuing their financial statement as scheduled: PREPA, fiscal year audit procedures on hold since we are in a reissuance process of the 2018 financial statements. GDB accounting records are not still completed. Auditors are expected to start the fieldwork by August 2020. TRS, auditors haven't started the fieldwork. It is the first year that the audit is going to be performed by KPMG. The ERS financial statements were recently issued on June 29th. The Puerto Rico Highway Fiscal year 2018 needed to be reissued and needed to engage BDO. Due to BDO situation, contract process could take longer than usual. And Puerto Rico Safe Drinking Water Treatment Revolving Loan Fund, the auditors have not been engaged yet. Contract process for auditors and consultants must occur shortly after June 30th, 2020, yesterday. The following component units experienced issues for the fiscal year 2017 financial statement issuance, but we are monitoring their progress to ensure or reduce the likelihood of major delays. ADEA, special communities, cardiovascular center, accounting closing underway, PBA, audit on hold after lockdown, extension of contract have been requested. Issuance should occur in the fourth quarter of 2020. DDEC, audit has not started, expected issuance by September 30th. And Ponce Authority and Ponce Port Authority, accounting is up to date, but the auditors has not been engaged. If we can go to slide 17, our long-term plan. Historically, the Commonwealth has issued financial statements from 10 to 12 months. We need to, after the closing of the fiscal year. If we go back to 2003, 2004, where GASB 34 was implemented, we can note an increase in the deliverable timeline. So certainly GASB 34 was a development that increases the challenges from the central accounting. So obviously taking in consideration the delay from 2014 and 15 financial statements back then, certainly has increased the deliverable period. The Treasury Department is working to reduce time between issuance of financial statements as initiatives are incorporated. The first milestone is to reduce the issuance experience thus far from 9 to 10 months between issuance. Final goal is to reduce the issuance to 6 months. The plan to achieve this reduction is based on 3 pillars. Hacienda along AFAF will closely monitor the delivery of component unit financial statements. This requires a level of technical competency in personnel that needs to be added to the central accounting department. To give you an example, not only we have only 27 active employees in the central accounting area, the bureau, which is the accounts bureau that is in charge to support the production of the financial statements, they only have 6 employees. And also we need to acknowledge that the bureau or the division that is part of this bureau has non-career employees working that. And we can keep betting on external auditors or external consultants, if you will, but certainly external consultants, they have their limitations with respect to managerial decisions that need to be taken in the central accounting area and in the corresponding agencies. So the approach provided thus far to increase the resources within the external consultants, they are not working as concise or as effectively as actually recruit personnel, competent personnel with their corresponding wages and salaries that should earn competent personnel within the area, acknowledging the fact that back in 2009, I was generating close to $30,000 on a yearly basis, and I was an entry-level employee. And that's almost the double than the experience faced by our current employees in the central accounting area. Obviously, the resources from the central accounting department, we need to perform a capacity plan to assess of the viability of complying with established deadlines, and develop a recruitment plan to attract and retain capable resources. That's critical. If we don't invest in our people, we will still have the results that we have been that we had thus far with this. And from the technological perspective, the third pillar, the ERP implementation, expect to yield many advances in the financial statement preparation. However, we can have a Rolls Royce with respect to technology, but we still need people to actually drive those resources. The ERP will enhance the accounting process as well as the reporting process. We should be going live by fiscal year 2022 in completely, and the enhancement will start to yield result as soon as the implementation is completed. It's a very similar experience than the one that we faced with the implementation of GenTax, which is SURI, which is the technological improvement made in the internal revenue area. Most significant enhancements include full audit trail. The trial balancer are maintained at modified accrual level. This reduces the manual hours from conversion entries, and this put us in a position to present financial statement from 6 to 7 months, because we are going to be facing efficiency from data entry, Excel files are eliminated, and the consolidations are automated. So certainly we need to invest in our process, in our resources, and in our technology. Obviously, keep the ongoing approach of vetting of external consultants has proved that it's not the best practice. Also, it's not the best practice to only have 27 underpaid employees in the central accounting area. It is not a good practice to have depleted the administration areas of each of the agencies with deal with the pre-intervention process and the accounting aspects that needs to be performed by the agencies, juggling around many duties within the agency from the officers in charge of this is not a best practice either. I used to be focused back then in 2009, strictly reporting and strictly accounting matters. And this helped that entity, that disappear entity, to actually comply with all the reporting requirements, which are very similar from a technical and difficult perspective than the ones facing in the government. With that, I complete my presentation and more than available for questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for your presentation. We will now open up the process to questions from members of the board, and I'm told we also have questions from folks listening in. Let me begin, if I may, by making an observation. Your job has always been daunting and complex in the best of times, and we're not in the best of times, and we recognize and acknowledge that. However, in the past, we were able to procure these CAFRs within a reasonable period of time. We've lost that habit, and I think that, particularly yourself, that confronted the COVID situation in a quick and expeditious manner, when you saw the urgency that was required to take this matter on, you took the matter on ably, and were able to get to our people the checks that they needed and the support that was necessary for them to keep going in light of the situation. I'd like to point out that there's no lack of resources to get this particular issue done. We need proper management, and we need a sense of urgency from you and your people to move these issues along, because we cannot keep on having this discussion. We've seen and we're familiar with the problems that you pointed out, and we need your full attention to this issue, much like you provided to the recent crises, which you were so successful. So I wanted to point that issue out. Now, if I may. Do any members of the board have any questions for the secretary? Mr.
Mr. Chair,
Garcia.
I would like to issue a few comments. I mean, first of all, Mr. Secretary, thank you for the comprehensive report into each of the items. I think we all understand the complexity of the job to be able to issue audited financial statements. I mean, we know that there are 90 central agencies, 75 components units, 26 different auditing firms and teams. So it is a complex environment. I know it's a fragmented process, that there are many different systems out there. But the truth is, as the chair was saying, I mean, we're back into the future in the sense that we're still behind 3 years in audited financial statements. We yet don't have 17, we don't have 18, we don't have 19. And yesterday we ended another fiscal year, so it's 20. So, I mean, we're supposed to start on another year. I mean, to me, from your report, I think the biggest issue is the issue of accountability. I mean, I know you and Mr. Marrero, CFO of the government, I mean, are accountable and as you describe, are trying to elicit a process. But unless you make accountable every single central agency and every component unit and every auditing firm and their cost and consequences, meaning that sense of urgency, for not doing the reconciliations on time, for not doing the adequate planning that they need to do, I mean, this is going to be a recurring situation. I mean, in the past, when the government has been successful at issuing audited reports within 6 months, that has been the process. I mean, there has to be consequences, I mean, for people. And I think you both are in a position where you can elicit a lot of that. And a lot of that is day-to-day management. It's using the different tools at your disposal, about holding funds, about holding petitions, about doing things that need to happen for people to know that these audited financial statements need to be completed. I mean, it's really disheartening, as I'm sure it's for you, for me as a board member, that we sit here 4 years after the enactment of PROMESA, and still, I mean, this part of the process hasn't been achieved. And even on the plans that you have said, I mean, still the best would be by the end of the year, maybe. I mean, you have 17 and 18 probably would have not started 19 and 20. So, I mean, my question to you is, I understand the complexities, but I mean, things need to change. The accountability needs to come from the top. I mean, the conversation needs to be had about what else needs to be done. I mean, if you keep trying to fix a system that I know that has many things that are broken, that don't have the resources, the results are going to unfortunately continue to be the same. Because I mean, we're unfortunately back to the same place where we continue to be delayed. And I know the world has changed, and I know Puerto Rico is on a bankruptcy-like process, and there are more complexities than what were the complexities before. But still, I think it's not time for excuses. It's time for accountability. And what I would want to ask you is, both of you, Mr. Marrero and you, I mean, you need to consider something really aggressive. I mean, more than what you just have explained to us. Because if not, I mean, this is going to continue on into next year, and you're not going to get to the goal, because I don't think right now that sense of urgency, it is felt by all the people that need to know in order for the audited financial statements to be completed. So my question to you is, I mean, please think about these things and do what you need to do, and ask for whatever you need to ask from others in order to get the urgency and put this together. Because certainly, I mean, Puerto Rico will not get out of PROMESA and will not get access to the financial markets if it cannot have timely audited financial statements. Even considering if in some of the agencies you need to have qualified statements. I know nobody likes to have qualified statements, but I mean, maybe that is the price to pay when people understand that there are consequences. So thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Does anybody have any? And Mr. Secretary, if you're welcome to opine, to answer, to say anything. In the meantime, does anybody have any additional questions for the Secretary or Omar?
I have a few comments with respect to both remarks. I am the same secretary for the results that we had with respect to the COVID reaction that was strictly based, obviously, in an effort from the internal revenue area and the technology area within the department. But I cannot neglect the fact that we worked 4 years in improvement from a technological standpoint. So my sense of urgency, people can perceive it with results because we invested in our processes. I'm still lacking on invest on our people within the internal revenue area and to make justice to our employees, which are very underpaid, specifically when we compare their compensation packages with other fiscal agencies that perform duties in Puerto Rico. So I'm the same secretary supervising both areas. And I can tell you that from technological perspective and how we can respond on a timely fashion the needs of the people of Puerto Rico based on the current best practices, the internal revenue, it's pretty much ahead of the central accounting area. And that wasn't performed with a lot of sacrifices from a budgetary perspective because $40 million were invested in the internal revenue area to put together this platform. But it was a process of 4 years, and we'll still need to put more resources within the internal revenue area to keep accelerating and improving the tax administration, which was I was honored to lead directly back 1 year ago as Assistant Secretary for Internal Revenue. But taking a closer look to the central accounting, I think that we are very understaffed in the central accounting area and from the mid management in the agencies that they have the responsibilities of taking managerial decisions to accelerate the reporting, to accelerate those financial decisions that are needed to encompass the pre-intervention process. If the board believes that the staffing is accordingly or the resources are accordingly, I beg to differ, and let's agree to disagree on that end. But quite frankly, being a person who was in charge of implementation from operational aspect, I can tell you that I'm seeing a big issue with respect to the agencies, with respect to the central accounting area, and human resources actually overlooking the best interests of the Puerto Rico with respect to this topic. That is not occurring right now. We have people juggling around with many duties. They are not strictly focused on the issuance of the financial statements. And if we believe that the resources are accordingly allocated, let's agree to disagree on that topic. I have my opinion based on my experience, based on the results that we have been provided by improving the technology, but certainly it's not lack of urgency and it's not lack of management. Alfonso Rossi has performed a great job with respect to monitoring and providing the resources within the agencies. But at the end of the day, what we have on hand are external consultants, and external consultants have their limitations. They have a few pros with respect to having them, but at the end of the day, they have their limitation, and I cannot overlook that.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Any further questions? Yeah, Dr. Biggs?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a brief comment. I mean, I would reiterate what Mr. Garcia from the board said, but I think this touches back on some of the points that Ms. Jaresko made earlier about civil service reform, about what she spoke about benchmarking practices in the Puerto Rico government in terms of things like staffing by department to what happens in the states. I looked back on the issuance of the CAFRs for Louisiana after they were hit by Hurricane Katrina, which destroyed the state, was very, very disruptive. For the 2005 CAFR, they issued it 2 weeks later than they had in previous years. So they had a delay, but a very, very small one. I think if we start thinking about management practices, and this isn't about the Treasury Secretary, this isn't about any specific person working for him, but is the government being managed in such a way to be effective? We see problems here on the audited financials. We see problems with people getting their unemployment checks. This seems to be something which is system-wide. It is not attributable to any particular government official. So I think this gets back to what Ms. Juresko said about let's benchmark the best practices in the rest of the state, see who is doing this well, how are they doing it. That is something that the board has talked about. I think we should work with the government to try to get that done.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, of course.
Thank you, sir. Some brief comment. Secretary Barry, thank you for always making yourself available. I would like to commend you for all the excellent work that you have done during the last 3 years and a half as Internal Revenue Secretary and obviously as Secretary of Hacienda of the Treasury. As a legal and financial professional, quite experienced in the development of financial statement for some complex institutions, I totally understand the value of transparency, and we all acknowledge the importance of obviously having financial statements updated and obviously complying with our obligation as issuer. We totally understand that this all information is used by a wide range of stakeholders. Therefore, that's why we have been committed since day one to obstacle bust in this process. The Oversight Board should expect for both the Secretary and myself be submitting a detailed plan that will be based in 3 major components. Some of them, the Secretary just mentioned, monitoring progress and obstacle busting, allocating resources to the key areas, and investing in technology. However, more importantly, something that it was mentioned by Mr. Garcia, Mr. Biggs, but particularly Mr. Garcia. This plan will be included or will be complemented with internal controls and direct oversight, and will provide the right incentives and disincentives for the different government heads and the different CFOs. We're going to be issuing an executive an administrative order from FOMB establishing a direct oversight and obviously providing, as I said, the right incentives and disincentives, which may include measures that have been implemented in the past, as you mentioned, including withholding petitions or funds. However, again, we also have to bear in mind the fact that this administration has been the first one to deal with PROMESA in a responsible way, although we have issued a lot of information that has been validated by the Oversight Board as well as some consultants, and we believe that we have been able to increase the transparency in the financial reporting. We totally understand that still we have not, we're not satisfied, neither the Secretary nor myself, nor the Governor, and we also acknowledge the fact that we have not been able to comply with the obligation that we have as issuers. So again, we are totally committed. So we expect to submit that plan that will address Mr. Garcia's recommendation as well as Mr. Biggs, and it will more importantly allow the government of Puerto Rico to fulfill its obligation with the financial statements.
Thank you. Does anybody have any further questions before we move on to public comments? Nope.
Mr. Chairman, I have one
Yes.
additional comment.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Biggs, I was able to visit the Department of Labor. I went by myself, I made some interviews. I went with one of the best resources that the Puerto Rico Treasury have as a career officer, which is my chief of staff, industrial engineering, and we produce a 20 pages long document with recommendations. And I can summarize that to you in a phrase or in 2 sentences. We need to invest in our governance. We need to invest in our people, in our processes, and in our technology. If we don't invest into that, we are going to be facing the same issues over and over and over again in different scenarios. We are facing this in the central accounting area. We are facing this in the Department of Labor and in other programs, as we are not investing in a effective fashion in our people, in our processes, and in our technology. So my recommendation to all of you and myself as secretary, we need to keep a closer attention on how we invest in our governance, because it's actually costing us and costing our people in Puerto Rico.
Thank you. Mr. Esco, there being no further comments, could you please read the public comments for the Secretary, for members?
These are questions for the government. First question from Mr. John Mudd. When will the 2017, 2018, and 2019 audited financial statements be completed and presented to the public?
by mid-August, the 2017, in the presentation, we stated that the draft was going to be performed or issued by November 30th. This will take actually the issuance date, let's say a couple of months more. Let's say that by the end of January or by, I'm sorry, by April 2021, the issuance of the 2018. And if we keep using the same approach with respect to the external consultants and with our investment in our people, I expect that the 2019 fiscal year financial statements will be issued by 2022, January 31st. So we need to do a dramatic change in the approach that we are giving from a budgetary perspective and the approach within investment in our processes, our technology, and our people.
Second question from Anna Felix. Who is in your department in charge of this process, and what are his or her credentials?
We have an assistant secretary for central accounting. His name is Alfonso Rossi. Alfonso Rossi is a CPA with vast experience in governmental accounting aspects. He was an external auditor, which, as a matter of fact, had an experience in the audit process of the Commonwealth back in 2010 and 2011, right? So his resume talks volume about himself, his experience, and he also was an external consultant of the government of Puerto Rico prior joining as assistant secretary for the central accounting.
The next question from Mr. Victor Gonzalez. It's a series of questions. First, these are regarding the audited financials of PREPA. Why, after 4 years of Financial Oversight Board oversight and over $300 million spent on lawyers and consultants, why don't we have audited financial statements of PREPA?
I was informed that the 2017 reissued financial statement were completed and were actually reissued today. We will send a copy with respect to that. The PREPA issues are very similar as the one that we discussed in the presentation from a government-wide perspective. The restructure process, the subsequent event process, the BDO's involvement are certainly facts that has played a factor to the delay of the issuance of the financial statements.
You may have just answered the next question, Secretary. If the last PREPA audit was dated December of 2018 for the year June 30th, 2016, except for what you just announced,
Yep.
that was not the case 10 years ago. What has changed? Perhaps that's what you just described.
Yep.
And his final question, Mr. Gonzalez's final question, how can a corporation prepare realistic budgets or fiscal plans without any audited financial statements for fiscal year 17, 18, and 19?
Certainly, we would prefer, and I think we are committed to have timely financial statements. In the meantime, in the process of getting up to date with that, as we mentioned before, we produce almost 44 reports that were not produced in the past by prior governments that actually help us to the models that actually forms a part of the fiscal plan. Some of those reports actually helps the Fiscal Oversight Management Board and the government of Puerto Rico to put together the needed forecast to comply with our obligations currently and in the future.
Thank you. And the final question from Max Capital LP. Did you say only one CPA in the Central Accounting Department? Shouldn't that be the priority for you? If you and the department are, I'll just read it for the record. If you and the department are so good at dispersing payments through SUDI, can you be as efficient in hiring people, even if through professional services? I mean, Deloitte had a contract worth millions of dollars, which I believe has not been renovated, but the department cannot say it doesn't have funding.
I completely agree. We need to refocus how we are investing our money. And that formed part of our presentation. The hiring process. Yes, we do have one CPA, and as a matter of fact, it's an employee of the Confianza service. It's actually Alfonso Rossi. So certainly, we want to increase the number of professionals with the resume that should be needed in order to form part of the group of the central accounting area. However, our human resources area, the compensations that are provided to officers or to potential officers is dramatically lower than the ones that pay in the private sector, not taking into consideration all the challenges that are embedded of being a public officer and how they are measured within the public and the media, which increases the challenge to recruit personnel. I will give you an example. I was appointed as secretary in July 2019. It was not a dream for any Puerto Rican back then to join part of the Puerto Rico Treasury Department after all the challenges that we faced in the previous month. So it's a challenge to recruit from a monetary perspective, and also for the quality of life that these public officers, they put themselves in jeopardy with all the scrutiny, sometimes reasonable, sometimes unreasonable, that actually affects the life of our employees and their families. Certainly, it's a challenge from a recruitment perspective. I completely agree. Professional services, they have their limitation. It's very good because if they don't perform, you can decline the hiring or reject the hiring and look for better resources in a more quicker fashion than a career employee. However, they have their limitation with respect to their roles and taking managerial decisions in the governmental duties.
That's all the public questions.
Thank you, Mr. Esco. Are there any further questions, members of the board?
Mr. Chair, I would like to say something. As I just heard the timetable that the secretary explained, I have to say, I believe that's completely unacceptable. I mean, we're talking that hopefully on the year 2022, you would have the fiscal year 2019. I mean, I don't think that's a timetable that reflects, I mean, the level of ambition and how important these things are. I would like to ask for the following of Mr. Secretary and Mr. Marrero. I would suggest, Mr. Chair, that we consider holding a public hearing in the next 30 days and the government comes with a plan. If this is an issue of investment in people, if this is an issue of investment in processes, this cannot be delayed any further. I mean, take 30 days and, I mean, let's not hear more challenges, more issues. I have this, I don't have that. Come with a comprehensive plan in the next 30 days, how within a year you will have the audited financial statements completed, I mean, for all the agencies and be on time. I mean, I don't think we can afford. I mean, Puerto Rico cannot afford that. The people of Puerto Rico shouldn't afford that. And no public servant should be satisfied with basically saying that for the foreseeable future, we're not going to have audited financial statements. So my proposal to the board members is that in the next 30 days, you come with a comprehensive plan that the target has to be that within a year, you have to have all these audited financial statements completed. Even if they have qualifications, you need to get this fast behind you. I mean, we all need this so you can move forward.
Mr. Marrero?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Garcia, I agree with you. Both the secretary and myself, we have discussed it, and the proposed timeline that he has shared, it is unacceptable. We both said, and that's why we were already discussing the plan. So I will, even though I don't have a voting privilege in this oversight board, I will second that, and you will have, in this oversight board, we'll have that detailed plan that you're mentioning, because we all agree this is unacceptable. Unfortunately, it is not only dependent on our efforts, but we'll make sure that you have that plan and the rest of the oversight board, because we are committed to make sure that we have audited financial statement with a reasonable time frame. And that 2019 time frame that the secretary mentioned, obviously we both discussed it. We don't agree with it, but we have to be respectful of the information that it was provided by the external consultant. But once again, we will commit to provide that plan within the timeframe that you have requested.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Before, Mr. Secretary, just a question. Do any board members have an objection to meeting once again in 30 days to deal with this particular issue? Are we all in agreement that that's a good idea? Good. I think we are.
Yes.
Good. Then we'll see each other in 30 days regarding this particular issue. Mr. Secretary, did you want to add anything to Mr. Marrero's statement?
I qualified the timeline to the approach that we, and I include all the agencies and all the government of Puerto Rico and instrumentalities, has been providing for the past 6 years. Certainly, I cannot come here and say with the same approach, we are going to be having different results, because I will be lying to all of you. I'm a very responsible person, and the timelines presented therein were analyzed by a competent people, by external consultants, former partners of national firms, specifically big foreign firms. We are making the disclosure with respect to the processes and the people and the resources that we have on hand. So certainly, I welcome any invitation to provide more information on how can we invest in Hacienda, so the people in Puerto Rico can have a testimony on the best practices implemented in our agency. So I'm very eager to present the plan of the resources that we need on a responsible fashion, on how we can recruit those people, and also how can the agencies increase their performance or enhance their performance with respect to the resources from the mid-management perspective and the field work, which has been depleted thus far. So I'm trying to be as responsible as possible, and I'm saying that with the current processes and the current approach, we're going to be having the same results that we have on hand. And saying another thing, it will be lying to the board members, and I'm not that professional. I'm very jealous with respect to my performance to you and to the people of Puerto Rico. And I'm saying the facts with respect to the processes and the resources that we have on hand. Certainly, we need to change that. And I completely agree. I'm not satisfied. I'm not satisfied to have a public hearing because we have almost 3 financial statements in delay. I want to be up to date in everything. But certainly, we have limitation problems. And if you are open to address them, come with me. Not 30 days, on a daily fashion. I can produce the information, our team can produce information. Is there a commitment to make something different for resolving this issue?
I think that's the general consensus. We will work with you to make that happen, and we will be back with a plan together with you to make these issues happen so that we can all comply and we can all do what needs to be done, which I think we all agree needs to be done. Kako, did you want to close this out?
I mean, not just, I'm not disagreeing with you, Mr. Secretary. We're not asking you to do what cannot be done with what you have. Actually, my request to you and to Mr. Marrero is that, I mean, please come with a transformation plan that can be executed within a year that would get us to that place. I mean, whatever it takes. I mean, think out of the box, the resources that you need, whatever needs to happen. But don't come in 30 days with a plan, and obviously the board will work together with you in whichever fashion can assist you. But the idea is come up with a plan that gets the solution with whatever changes needs to happen. Because certainly if you continue to do the same processes, I mean, you're going to get the same results. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. Thank you, everyone, and members who are watching for a very constructive and productive meeting. So we're grateful. We're grateful to all of you. So let's move on. And move on to the conclusion. But before we conclude, we have other matters to attend to. And I would like to briefly read, if I may, a statement that I prepared. I would like to read it in Spanish. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. I would like to inform that I have notified the White House that I will not be available to be nominated, reappointed for a second term as a member of the Oversight Board for Puerto Rico. When I was appointed, I committed to serve a term of 3 years, and I will be fulfilling 4 years in August. 20 years ago, I had a fight with cancer while my wife was pregnant with my daughter. The next year, I helped to start a company with 100 employees. These were very difficult life experiences and challenging for me and my family. Definitely, these experiences have taught me that life takes you different unforeseen paths, but and unexpected, but they can bring you a lot of awards. In 2016, that led me to the most challenging job and difficult in my professional career. However, I must state that being president of the Oversight Board was also the one that has brought me a lot of opportunities to contribute to Puerto Rico in a positive manner. I feel fortunate and thankful to have worked shoulder to shoulder with very talented colleagues with different backgrounds, ideologies, and life experiences. Together, we've taken hundreds of decisions, difficult decisions, but fair decisions for the benefit of our people, almost all of them in an unanimous way. My fellow workers and fellow members of the board have advocated for Puerto Rico in a firm and passionate manner without any money compensation. So I'm very proud that the group of professionals, I'm very proud of them, experts in public policy, individuals who are very committed, impressive commitment, and a lot of drive, Puerto Ricans, most of them who have supported the best options for Puerto Rico. I'm very proud to be able to defend the pensions of all employees, public employees, despite the insolvency of the pension system. We have certified fiscal plans and responsible budgets with adequate controls, regardless of political agendas. And it's thanks to that support we have been able to react responsibly to the different crises we have faced, like the earthquakes and the pandemic. I'm also proud to continue in the progress with the restructuring of the public debt, saving the government of Puerto Rico and the people of Puerto Rico thousands of millions in principal and interest.
And last but not least, we approve the public and private alliance to transfer a consortium of the private sector, the management and operation of the Prepa. Of course, there have been deceptions, the main one being among them the lack of commitment to implement structural reforms. It is well known how important they are to propose our economy going more further ahead from their federal. Puerto Rico doesn't lack human resources, capital, ideas, or studies or plans to improve its economy. What it lacks is determination to implement transformative reforms to the benefit of our people. Lee Kuan Yew, the deceased father of Singapore, wrote that so that politicians can win, they've had to promise more and more, and it's a never-ending process, with the debt having been paid for the next generation. There is a tendency to postpone unpopular public policies to win elections. That is how problems have been passed along from one generation to the next. My promise have been, it is an imposition over Puerto Rico. Nonetheless, it is also a lifeguard and a tool that has prevented Puerto Rico from drowning in a sea of debt. It is definitely not perfect, but if we use it appropriately, it can continue to help our government to find the exit of its public debt and to establish the base of a more prosperous future for generations of Puerto Ricans. I would like to thank all those who have supported us, me, as well as the board, and I would like to thank especially my daughter and my wife, Gloria, for all their patience, understanding, and advice, sage advice. That's how I would like to thank the president and the leaders of the Congress to have had the opportunity to serve Puerto Rico. My last day would be October 5, 2020, or when the president and the Congress would assign my successor. What happens first? Thank you very much.
Would anybody else like to say a few words before we close?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I'm allowed, I would also like to share a statement.
Proceed.
Thank you. I want to thank the Office of the President of the United States for the opportunity that I have been given to serve as a member of the Promesa Board, and to all my fellow members, you, Mr. Chair, Jose Carrion, Jose Ramon Gonzalez, Ana Mato Santos, George Arthur Gonzalez, Professor David Skill, and Andrew Big. It has been a privilege to serve in this capacity during the past almost 4 years. It has been a remarkable experience and a lot of hard work, which we have done with great respect and admiration for each other, and more importantly, on a collegiate manner, minding always the best interests of our people of Puerto Rico. Thank you to Natalie Jaresco, Jaime Alcuri, and all the board staff and collaborators for your dedicated and persistent work. If I may, now I will switch to Spanish.
After almost 4 years of service pro bono, one more year than the initial 3-year agreement, today I have informed the Office of the President of the United States that I am not available for the renomination for the new term, and after the 31st of August, I will leave my seat vacant as a member of this board. The board has acted in a collegiate manner and cooperative under its mandate under Promesa, and keeping into account the best interests of the people of Puerto Rico. We have had many challenges: 2 hurricanes, earthquakes, and a pandemic, 3 governors in 4 years, and a lot of interests to balance. But Puerto Rico has been able to stabilize its finances and to have fiscal accountability and to restructure part of its debt, which is very important to have your essential services. Even though of this, there's a lot of to cover. In my opinion, there are 4 key challenges that Puerto Rico has: the political and electoral key to provide health care services as well as education, to protect those who need it, and to guarantee the social security, and to change the way the government works, and to create the environment to have a better economic business environment, and the government can have the needed help assigned by the Congress, by the U.S. for Puerto Rico, and that it may have the ability to overcome such challenges from the natural disasters. And third, that all the parties can get together and see the opportunities that Puerto Rico has among the pandemic, and for reasons for the relocation of the pharmaceutical and for the medics located outside of our island. This is a great opportunity that we must take advantage of, and to which the Oversight Board has conducted an independent study that can benefit the sectors, all the sectors of Puerto Rico. And finally, that the government of Puerto Rico can focus with priority and leadership to put its financial statements up to date, as we discussed, and as we will discuss again in 30 days, so that Puerto Rico can have a viable future without needing an oversight board, and that Puerto Rico can regain his automatic and democratic government. I wish you all success for the well-being of Puerto Rico and its future generation. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Carlos.
Anybody else like to make a statement or say anything? Okay, let's,
Mr. I'd like to say just a word or two. This is not the proper time to thank Jose Carrion and Carlos Garcia. Fortunately, they are not stepping down immediately, but I would like to just say a couple of words now. Anyone who has not been inside the board for the last 3.5 years couldn't imagine the amount of work that Jose Carrion and Carlos Garcia have put into this task. It's been truly extraordinary. Each of them have gifts that are in many respects irreplaceable. They are different gifts in some respects, just as each one of us of the 7 on the board have different gifts. But as I said, they really are irreplaceable in many respects. We were asked going on 4 years ago, as Jose Carrion mentioned in his remarks, to serve for 3 years, to basically put our lives on hold for 3 years to try to help in some small way Puerto Rico to recover from this very long-term crisis. It's now been almost 4 years. Jose and Carlos have worked this entire time without pay, like the rest of the board. They've done this solely because of their love for the people of Puerto Rico and their desire to make Puerto Rico a more economically, or help make Puerto Rico a more economically vibrant place. I think when we all look back on this, hopefully in a very happy future down the road, history will conclude that they were a very, very important part of the path to a better future. From my perspective, I'll say only it has been a tremendous privilege to serve with both of you. I'm humbled to be in the same group as each of you. I've learned so much from both of you. I look forward to being friends for the rest of our lives. And I assure you, we're not going to fully let you go. Even after you all leave, we will be calling on you repeatedly and look forward to the contributions you will continue to make. So I say for myself, and I'm sure for others as well, thank you for everything.
thank you for those kind words. Thank you for those kind words, David.
Thank you, David.
You and
Mr. Chair?
you and the other members of the board who are not from Puerto Rico have worked selflessly and tirelessly, as has Natalie and our staff, for the benefit of our people, and you should be commended. And there's a great many people in Puerto Rico who are grateful to you. So,
Mr. Chair, I just recognize for a second, I'd like to join in Professor Skeel's remark. I've been very pleased and proud to serve with both of you and the rest of the board. And I can say, just as clearly as I possibly can, that we have not always agreed in these 3.5 years, but I never doubted for a second that any decision that was made by members of the board were anything else but done so for what they believe to be in the best interest of the people of Puerto Rico. And for that, I think I'm extremely proud to work with members of the board that always guide their decisions by what is in the best interest of the people of Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Arthur.
go ahead, Mr. Marrero.
Yes, well, on behalf of the governor of Puerto Rico and the people of Puerto Rico, I would like to thank you, both you and Mr. Caco Garcia, for making yourself available in such a tough job. Obviously, we all know that serving public office is an honor, privilege, but also carries a lot of many challenges. Many people do not understand, but we try to strive through them. When we have the best interest of the people of Puerto Rico in front of us. We have disagreed many times, and that's a reality. However, as Mr. Gonzalez mentioned, we never doubted that both of you, as the rest of the oversight members, have the best interest of the people of Puerto Rico in front of us. Obviously, we still have a enormous and titanic job in front of us. We wish you the best always to both of you as well as the rest of the Oversight Board members. And once again, muchas gracias. Thank you very much for the job that you have done in the last few years. And once again, hopefully we'll see each other in some other moments. But muchas gracias en nombre del pueblo de Puerto Rico, definitivamente. Thank you.
Gracias. Gracias por esas palabras, Omar. Muy generosa. Muchas gracias. Shall we move on? So, there being no other matters to cover, I move that we adjourn this meeting. Can I have somebody second that, please?
I'll second that, Mr.
Well, thank you. Let's move to a voice vote. Those, please say yes and raise your hands. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
All members having voted in favor of adjournment, the meeting is now adjourned at 12:27. I invite folks to stay, whomever wants to stay for the press conference that is to follow. Thank you very much.